Now we're going to look at bringing the object of aversion onto the path. So over here it has two aspects. The first one is the object of aversion, and then the second one is object of attachment, bringing both of them onto the path. If I do not tame the enemy, that is my own anger, subduing outer enemies will only increase them. Therefore, it is the practice of bodhisattvas to tame one's own being by means of the armies of loving kindness and compassion. Among all enemies, the most difficult to tame are the ferocious enemy of the negative emotions, such as anger within our stream of being, our mind stream. Some people have a great deal of anger, some rather not. But whenever you were to give rise to the mind of aggression, it's difficult to tame them. If you can tame them, if you manage to tame the aggression, then just as the smoke vanishes when a fire is extinguished. If there is no fire, then naturally there is no smoke. If there is no anger, then naturally there would be no outer enemies such as demons and so on. Yet, if we do not subdue them, then however many of the outer ordinary troublemaking enemies we may conquer, it is the nature of things that they will not be depleted but will increase instead, just as President Putin that want to conquer Ukraine in a short period of time and want to take over Ukraine, but as a small country that is Ukraine, so many different countries would provide all kinds of weaponries to them. If at the very beginning they were to generate compassion and chant the mantra of Avalokiteshvara, instead they started saying Wura. Wura is onomatopoeia or a sound that they would gather courage to fight the others. It's similar to Lagalo that we would say over here. And what's the use of that if one were not to tame one's mind? Then there would be ever increasing enemy on the external phenomena. Just as Geshe Bengungyal once said that after I got ordained, I don't have any enemy anymore. When I was not ordained, I had all kinds of wounds. Now that I'm ordained and tame my mind, I have no enemy at all. It is simply the natural law. It is hard to uproot all kinds of anger at this point, but if we can use compassion and loving kindness, we can at least oppress it. To truly uproot the anger and aggression, we need also the wisdom of non-duality. According to the Pramana teachings, by relying only on loving kindness and compassion, it would be hard to uproot anger completely. And then, according to the way of the Bodhisattva, it says unruly sentient beings are as unlimited as space. Never will they all be overcome. However, if this angry mind alone is subdued, every enemy will thereby be destroyed. The worldly beings would think that it would be the best for us to be stronger than the others. Otherwise, if we were to be weaker and weaker, then others would definitely harm you and to insult you. But as it is stated in the gateway to training the mind, as well as the 7 points of training the mind, it is stated that if one were to think that one has to be strong to compete with the others, that is simply foolish language coming from people who have no idea of Mahayana Buddhism. But the worldly beings indeed would think in such a way. Some people would think that being weak is probably the worst thing that one can behave in this world, because then one would be harmed by the others. However, what we're talking about here is that one has to have compassion, and compassion is not a sign of weakness. Rather, it is the greatest thing that one can do as a practitioner. The two cannot be you cannot take the two as the same. What it means is that if you can tame your own mind stream, if you don't tame your own mind, then you will not be able to tame the enemies everywhere. Also, where could we find such amounts of leather to cover the whole earth with leather? Yet by simply wrapping some leather around your feet, it's as if the whole earth has been covered. We usually would quote this very often. It means that if you can practice patience wherever you are, then you would not be harmed if you can practice patience. But if you don't practice patience, even if you were to stay with 2 or 3 people for one night in, for example, a motel or anywhere, then on the second day, if nobody practiced patience, then it would be difficult for you to get along. It means that if you don't, it means that if you tame your own mind stream, then it is equivalent to say that you've already subdued all your enemies. According to the 400 verses, it also says that even though the harmful has been slain, the enemy will not come to an end. If one's own anger is killed, through that all enemies are slain. The treasure of precious well-spoken statements also explained it accordingly. This is also a text on training the mind. I'm not sure who composed it, though. We can look into it later. There are many methods for taming the mind. Although here cultivation of love and compassion is taught, these two, love and compassion, are the highway of great vehicle and the root of mind of enlightenment. There are various kinds of ways of working with your mind to tame your mind, but over here, the main methods are loving kindness and compassion. To practice love and compassion is indeed difficult. We need to take some particular time to practice compassion. Today, some of the male Sangha member made offering to me saying that he's going to practice the practice manual of the Great Chariot. This is really wonderful. Whenever we look at our state of mind, we need to look at how much compassion we've generated. You need to change your mind. Change is really the key word. After you listen to some Dharma teachings, has your mind been touched and has your actions been changed after that Dharma teaching? For example, if you were to have lots of aggression before, now has your aggression at least declined, or now have you generated some compassion to the sentient beings? If you were to have such kind of change, then that's really wonderful. Otherwise, if you were to listen to the teachings, or if you are Khenpo and Khenmo, even if you do not have any changes in your mind, then there is not much meaning to it. Back in 1991, I went to the city Mianyang, and I went there to see an old lay practitioner whom is well known by lots of our senior practitioners over here. He received the empowerments of Bodhisattva in front of Phuntsok Rinpoche, and then later chanted about 100 million times of Bodhisattva mantra, and copied or written hundreds of volumes of the Diamond Sutra. and he would chant it once every day, the Diamond Sutra that is. He's also making the vow of chanting 100 million times of Padmasambhava mantra. He had already finished this 70 million right now, and he's hoping to finish it within his life. Recently, he's probably just reached about 80 years of age, and I remembered I've known him for the past 30 years, and he had never stopped practicing. So the steadfast aspect, such kind of steadiness of the mind of practitioners is really important. Whatever kind of teacher that you would encounter, to have the change of your mind and have the change of your behavior and activity is really important. I'm not just talking about lay practitioners or monastics. Some of you who, for example, used to eat meat and would do lots of non-dharmic things, but because of certain kinds of causes and conditions that you've studied Dharma, and then you stopped eating meat, stopped killing, stopped sexual misconduct, and then got ordained, and then your mind had lots of change. So this really shows that you have lots of power in your mind. However, if you don't take the teachings into your heart and mind, if you don't pay attention in class, if you don't change your mind stream, then we are simply playing a game, and it doesn't have much of meaning to it. Unlike the great masters of Langri Tangpa or those geshis or those great masters that would transform their mind after one class, after listening to thousands of classes, some of you may have not changed your mind even for a little bit. Not only that, some of you probably change your mind to the vice. Maybe some of you started off with faith to the three jewels, but slowly lost that faith. Anyhow, those are the examples of unsuccessful practice. In the ornament of the sutras states, its root is considered to be compassion, and love is the stem for compassion. From Precious Garland of the Middle Way, it says that the great vehicle which explains that all conduct is to be preceded by the compassion and embraced with stainless wisdom. Who of sound mind would look down on that? Entering the Middle Way also states love is the perfect harvest of victorious ones. Indeed, it is considered the seed, the enriching water, and the ripening remaining as enjoyment for long. Therefore, I shall praise compassion first of all. Furthermore, Lord Atisha explained, if the inner mind is tamed, an outer enemy cannot cause harm. He continued, if you lack love and compassion, you are not a bodhisattva. The Tibetans might know of some bodhisattvas who have no idea how to train in love and compassion. Back around that time, people can hardly travel to Tibet because of the lack of the means of commute. That is why Atisha said that other than Tibet, there is no other place that would know of bodhisattvas who have no idea of how to train in love and compassion. Well, then, what should they do? They should train gradually from the beginning. Juntunpa also said, if one never parts from loving kindness, compassion, and the mind of enlightenment, rebirth in the lower realms will be impossible. Therefore, this is known as instantly becoming a non-returner. If you would not be reborn in lower realms, then this person is called a non-returner. And then Buddha explained, since we will not become enlightened through apprehending an enemy and conceptualizing in terms of near and far, we must give rise to an impartial loving kindness towards all sentient beings equal to the limits of space. This is really difficult indeed. Whenever we were to see people that we have attachments, our teacher, our disciple, our relatives, we would grasp onto them, and it would be difficult for us to have impartial loving kindness towards all sentient beings. Let it be the relatives and the loved ones, as well as the enemies and the ones that we have aversion. And then Karakpa explained the following: give up all malice and ill will towards all kinds of sentient beings of the three realms, who in the past were our parents, and thus meditate on loving kindness. When Chengangwa was explaining many reasons why loving kindness is so important, Longri Tangpa prostrated to him and said, at that time, Longri Tangpa started to get quite excited, and it's similar to some of us at the time of listening to the Dharma teaching from a teacher. People would start to tear up and then prostrate. At that time, Longri Tangpa prostrated to him and then said, from today on, I will cultivate loving kindness exclusively. I think the great masters of the past, after one Dharma teaching, their minds would be completely transformed. But of course, one of the reasons that Longri Tangpa became such a great master in the later times, it is because he has some insights. Without genuine insights, whatever kinds of words that he would say would not have any impact. But his language has gentleness and has that kind of warmth and moisture of the blessings and the realization. That is how his language definitely is very different. Without such kind of insight, then the language would be rather dry. And then, after Longri Tangpa prostrated and made the vow that I would cultivate loving kindness exclusively, Chengangwa took off his hat and, after folding his hands above his head, said, "This is extremely wondrous." In Tibet, taking off one's hat, usually giving the Dharma teachings, the Khenpos would wear a Khenpo's hat, and then after taking off the hat is one of the most respectful actions. So the teacher took off the hat and prostrated to and folded the hands to the disciples, saying that this is the most wondrous. I should prostrate to you. Once the three brothers, Puchongwa, Chengangwa, and Potowa, along with a disciple of Kamlongpa, went to meet Druntumpa. If you remember the story included in the this is a story included in the words of my perfect teacher. Putowa and the others inquire about Druntumpa's doing, and in the end, Druntumpa inquired Kamlongpa, what has he been doing? And they answered, he has seated himself at the bank of the river, has covered his head, and does nothing but cry. Each of the three disciples were doing various kinds of things. So one builds the stupa, builds the statues, and writes sutras, and would practice to create the reliant place of the three jewels, which is really wonderful. And Kumpawa was practicing in retreat. Druntumpa also praised his activity. And then Kalungpa was simply sitting at the river doing nothing but crying every day. And then Druntumpa was deeply touched. He said that he is indeed practicing compassion. Though all the other virtuous activities, such as making the reliant place of the three jewels, or building statues and monasteries, as well as giving Dharma teachings and practicing and so on and so forth, those are all really virtuous activities. However, the key is that, can you really change your mind? Can you practice practice loving kindness and compassion and generate bodhicitta to each and every sentient being. This is the essence of Mahayana teaching. So after knowing that, he took off his hat and showed his reverence to Kolompa as well. This is also the kind of action, taking off the hat, that is also an action of showing respect in various places in the world, in Asia, in Europe as well. People would take off their hats to show reverence. Usually, whenever we see some of the lay practitioners, if they were to have faith to the monastics, they would take off their hats whenever they see the monastics. Of course, without faith, some people would particularly put on a hat once they see the monastics as a sign to insult them. But, well, it doesn't really matter. But I don't think it's necessary to do that purposely anyways. If we could also give rise to such an unfabricated loving kindness, then we would be able to directly exchange the happiness and suffering of ourselves and others, and without any concern for our life and body, be able to accomplish the benefit of others. Furthermore, from the Bodhisattva himself, you should give up the mind hostile towards the enemy. If you do not subdue your anger, the outer enemies will not disappear through conquests. If you tame that, it will not be necessary to conquer enemies. Moreover, if we lack the intention to liberate beings equal to space, perfect enlightenment will not be achieved. Therefore, we should cultivate love and great compassion. He taught in this way and practiced exactly that.
Sunamdai tamche zubanya tona nibe jana pamshe jirga nanchi ranon treba chubum sonen jova jurasho